Thank you, Governor Suzanne, for that. I'm not going to tell you about PCEPA today specifically, but I'm going to tell you how we got to the change and what the process was to get to the change, and then also talk a little bit about what advocacy is as opposed to being political, because that seems to be a topic at the moment. And my story, although the petition was in 2008 or 9, my story starts in 2002, and I'm going to go back to the beginning just to show you that there is a progression to advocacy. It's not an instant, it's not instant, trust me. So in 2002, I attended the international conference, Soroptimist International Conference in Sydney, Australia. I was governor at the time, and I met with somebody called Roswitha Benish, who was one of the 2 Soroptimist representatives at the UN in Vienna. And we had some discussions. I had been a criminal lawyer both in South Africa and in Canada. And we had discussions, and as it always happens, I ended up agreeing to help her with the UN conference that was scheduled for 2005 in Bangkok. And I literally thought that we were going to be writing letters to people to get them to go to the conference or speak at the conference, or I don't know what I was going to be doing. A year later, she contacted me and said, could you do the presentation at the conference, please? The topic is prosecuting child traffickers. Well, I still had a little bit of time, so I spent quite a lot of time gaining knowledge about the topic so that I could speak about it. Human trafficking at that time, including trafficking through prostitution, had not been included in the criminal code. It was recognized in some of the immigration laws. So it was recognized in 2000, 2001 by the Palermo Protocol by the United Nations, and then countries ratify that, and then they add it to their own laws. So I spent a year researching the topic, put together the presentation, and it was not as easy as researching these days because it wasn't on the books of most countries. And basically my information came anecdotally through newspaper articles and the odd article that had been written, the odd paper that had been written. In Bangkok, where the conference was, an interesting place for a conference on human trafficking, I'll say, because you could see it happening around you. There were a group of Soroptimists from Thailand, Sweden, Czech Republic, and various other countries in Europe. After the presentation, months after the presentation, I was invited to represent SI at an NGO meeting in Vienna and in Courmayeur, which is in Italy. And from all of these interactions, and every time I'd have to write a report, of course, because I'm doing this on behalf of Soroptimist, to SI and SIA, we became aware of the Nordic model. This is the model first adopted by Sweden to decriminalize the selling of sex and criminalizing the purchase of sex, and was then adopted by other Nordic countries before it's now been adopted by a bunch more. I brought all of, so SI then drafted a position paper, which I helped them with respect to human trafficking and to our position with respect to prostitution. And SI then adopted the Nordic model. I brought this knowledge back to the region and did a lot of advocacy work, raised awareness through speaking publicly at Soroptimist events and non-Soroptimist events, worked a lot with the Salvation Army. It's important to do research about any topic for which you want to advocate. You really need to become aware and gain a lot of knowledge about it. So in approximately 2008 or 9, so this is almost 7 years after the first meetings that I'd had back in Australia, the Western Canada region decided to petition the government and to make changes to the criminal code to adopt the Nordic model. I drafted the petition, and club members spent a further 2 years collecting approximately 6,000 signatures. In 2009, I think it was we did it basically in BC, so there's no BC region, if you like, but a number of clubs in BC held a fundraising event, and we raised money for the Salvation Army home that it was the first home to help trafficked women victims of trafficking. It was very secret, very specialized and safe house, basically. So we raised money for them at the same time, raising awareness. We had speakers like Victor Malarick from W5, who's written a number of books about human trafficking and has rescued victims of human trafficking. And innovative, I know it sounds very silly today, but innovatively, SI Edmonton joined us by video. It was very high tech. Today we've got Zoom, but we didn't have Zoom. And so basically, we had this high tech. I'm very excited to have somebody from out of province join this event. We raised $20,000 that evening, apart from raising awareness. During my speaking engagements that I started, once you get started with one, you get invited to another and so on and so forth. I learned about Joy Smith, who's the MP, and that she was also interested in promoting the Nordic model. So Joy was the MLA for a riding in Manitoba, and she was also a member of the Conservative Party, which was the, let's call it governing or majority party in Canada at that time while we were trying to promote this Nordic model. I connected with her and told her about the petition. She then asked if she could adopt the petition and translate it into French. I hadn't thought about that, of course, being in BC, just being so Anglophone. So after we collected the more than 6,000 signatures, I met up with Joy at a conference or speaking event in Vancouver and handed her the petitions. In 2011 or 12, and I'm not sure of the year anymore, she tabled a private member's bill to make changes to the criminal code and to adopt the Nordic model. And this bill then eventually became law as PCEPA, which was adopted and approved by Parliament in December of 2014. So you can see this was a very long process, wasn't instant at all. But I'd like to think that those 6,000 signatures made a difference and helped get the bill to Parliament. So there's a couple of things to note from that story. It's one is that ordinary people can petition the government. The government, elected by the people, should listen to the people. Approximately 1,500 petitions are sent to the House of Commons annually. The procedure for petitions in the House of Commons is set out on the government website, and I should have given Esther Tira some notice, but can you bring up that page for me, please? And I'll carry on just talking.
Yes, you carry on. I'm just going to bring it up in a second, okay?
Okay. So something else to remember is that we have a federal laws here. So we have federal government, as you know, and provincial government. So you need to pick your forum correctly. You need to, if something is federal, like the criminal code, then you petition the House of Parliament. If it's something that's provincial, then you petition the MLAs and your particular parliament, provincial parliament. Do you have it? Okay. So there is a procedure. It's just one little page, but there is a procedure on the government website, the House of Commons website, telling you exactly how to do a petition. And it also gives you the format for a petition. I haven't got the format up here, but I have the website. If you go to ourcommons.ca, then you can find the method and the language which to use. So have a look at this. This is actually quite surprising. They, of course, now have electronic petition that wasn't available back in 2009 for some reason. But a paper petition, you need to create it using the format. You then gather the signatures and you send it to a member of parliament. It doesn't have to be your member of parliament. I would say send it to a member of parliament of the governing party, because it's no point doing it to the other. I mean, you can do it to the other people, but the governing party is going to get that through parliament. And what surprised me is that you only need 25 signatures for it to be certified by the clerk of petitions, which means any club basically could petition the government. Now, I think if you're going to try to make any changes, try to get a few more than 25. 6,000 was a very good number and clearly indicated, and I'm sure that Joy Smith got more, that indicated that there was a significant amount of Canadians, because you have the only other stipulation is you have to be Canadian to sign a petition. You can't be a resident. So the more signatures you get, the more important the topic might be, or the more people are indicating that they want the change that's being proposed to be made. And then it's up to the MP, and that you can see that having met Joy Smith earlier, building that little bit of a relationship, she was actually working in the same way, finding her. That's what helped get this petition through Parliament. And then that person tables it either as sort of from the government or as a private member's bill. And then you just have to wait and see. But it's not a quick fix by any means at all. Thanks, Esther Tira. So if anybody's intending to bring a petition to Parliament, pick an issue, research it very carefully and decide what the desirable end would be, what the success would look like. We didn't get everything we asked, but that's life. We got most of it. Have a committee and a budget. Decide how to reach the desirable end, either by letter writing. You can't just send in a petition and hope for the best. You've got to create that awareness. You've got to create awareness in your community. And that community could be like West Vancouver, it could be BC, or it could be more than that. And hold public events, advertise in the media if you can. We didn't do that, but we did hold public events, which were advertised. Actually, I got onto the Christy Clark show to talk about it. I can't remember how that happened, but I did. And so that was really handy. And I think they were more interested in talking to Victor Malarick, and I promised to get Victor Malarick on the show. And then during the interview, which was only about 6 days before the event, I didn't have a MC, and I cheekily asked Christy Clark if she would do it, and she did. So it all helps. And then she was invested, of course, in promoting it, because she was going to be there. So all these kinds of things help a little bit. So very quickly, what is the difference between advocacy and being political? And I've deliberately told you about the parties and which party Joyce Smith was representing. I haven't told you, and I'm not going to tell you which party I vote for, generally speaking, because that doesn't actually matter, and that's really the point. The issue of advocacy as being opposed to being political arose this year, specifically at the time that Roe versus Wade was being overturned, and I'm going to deal with that head on, because we sort of skirt over that. The US Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, which, and I'm not a US lawyer, and I haven't read Roe versus Wade, I don't really intend to, which I understand it means that the right for women to have access to abortion is no longer protected, and each state can adopt their own law. In the US, there's a division between pro-life and pro-choice, and unfortunately, it seems to have gone down party lines for the most part. And this is why it is now perceived to be political. But it's really a human rights issue. It's whether or not a woman has the right to choose. So to some, it appears that to take a stand one way or the other is to promote the political party above the other, and I disagree with that. So I'm going to have a look at Soroptimist International states as its purpose this. SI advocates for human rights and gender equality through education and empowerment. At the heart of Soroptimist International's advocacy is its work across 7 United Nations centers, in which 21 representatives ensure that the voices of women and girls around the world are included in international decision-making. Soroptimist International collaborates with other like-minded organizations on issues of mutual concern, working together towards our common aspirations for women. The UN representatives can advocate and effectively on behalf of women and girls as a result of evidence provided by every Soroptimist taking direct action at the local level. So we are encouraged through the international organization to advocate for change and for human rights and for gender equality. So if an issue offends one of those areas, then we must advocate for a change. So if it offends gender equality or a human right, the right to choose, we have to. And it doesn't mean that you're putting your party aside necessarily, you're just disagreeing with it on that particular point. Advocacy is key to our organization. That's what we do. Our goal is to strive for human rights, for equality, for the best for women and girls. The principles of SI are the advancement of the status of women, high ethical standards, human rights for all, equality, development, and peace, and the advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace. Advocacy is the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. Any advocacy work must promote the principles of Soroptimist International. As Soroptimists, we strive to improve the lives of women and girls, irrespective of political parties. Advocacy means we challenge lawmakers and politicians. We write to MPs and MLAs. Now, here's the main difference between being political and advocating. If I were to suggest to my fellow Soroptimists that we all vote for Party A in the next election, because that will ensure we vote for the person running for Party A in each of our ridings in the next election, because I know that Party A will promote a particular cause that we have and it'll be easier to get it passed through Parliament. That's being political. We don't do that as Soroptimists. Voting for your person of choice is your democratic right, and it's a private matter. But as I've demonstrated, see, once that a person is an MP, they work for everybody in that riding. They don't ask you whether or not you voted for them. They don't ask you if you're riding, whatever your MP, whichever party he represents. Once that person is in that position, you can go to them and ask them to make changes in government. You can go to them and speak to them. And I know that, for example, the person that represents us in West Vancouver, I know people who belong to the opposite party who had half-an-hour meetings with the MP. That it doesn't matter anymore what party they belong to. They're working for you in the riding, and you can contact them. You can go to them with their issues, and you can write to them as a club. And that is the advocacy part. It's not being political. Any questions? Thank you.
That was great.
That
Thank
was
you very
brilliant.
much, Janneke. I just had one sentence from you, and I like that. I put it in the chat. I said, advocacy is challenging the ideas. And sometimes we forget that that idea can come from anyone, someone we have elected as an official, and someone we haven't elected. And I think that's the biggest confusion. At least I can speak. And I think, probably others can talk to that as well. I think that's where we can open the floor for discussion. But one very specific case that you were also aware was when we were trying to get, one simple statement of support for Iranian women. And it really, really took Soroptimist 6 or 7 weeks to send one statement to say that we are in solidarity. And the problem was that, they were all number one, scared, I would say, because they were scared that they will fall into the part that they are political. And I think that's an important distinction to make. We advocate. Thank you. I'm just leaving it to you, Suzanne.
No, absolutely. And I think that, it's really strange how we have got to a point where we're scared of offending somebody. Oh, they might leave Soroptimists, or we can't offend them. If somebody is against women's rights, frankly, they're offending me, and we need to take a stand. That's what our organization is. We're not the WI, we have to take a stand. That's what we do.